Father of 3, sterile since birth, takes wife of 20 years to court and finds out. Scary diagnosis. Being diagnosed with a health condition can be scary, and Richard Manson can attest to this. When he learned he was suffering from cystic fibrosis, his entire world came crashing down around him. Richard was 55 years old and had 3 sons with his ex-wife of over 20 years. Richard's diagnosis made him wonder if his wife had lied to him for years. Richard and Kate. Richard met his wife Kate while they worked together at a bank. The couple fell in love, married, and had 3 beautiful sons. Richard worked hard to provide a good life for his family and never expected that things would fall apart. The couple had a son named Will and twins Ed and Joel. When Richard and Kate's marriage started falling apart, they decided to separate when Will was 23 and the twins were 19. The couple knew that the marriage wasn't working and would remain close to their sons, but since they were all over 18, they divorced in 2008. The divorce. The couple both agreed that a divorce would be the best for everyone. And when the proceedings began, Kate wanted Richard to pay more money. And in the financial settlement, they both agreed that Kate would receive a $5 million lump sum. The money Kate would receive would help pay for the boys' school, but couldn't understand why she wanted more than $5 million. Richard says that his ex hounded him for years to get more money. 2016. By 2016, the couple had been divorced for 8 years, and Richard discovered his ex-wife had kept a secret from him for their entire marriage. Richard didn't know about the secret until he went to the doctor for a routine checkup. Richard was sure his ex-wife always after his money, but he never expected that she would keep something so serious a secret throughout their marriage. Cystic fibrosis. Richard was 55 years old when he went to the doctor for his annual physical. He figured it'd be a straightforward appointment and he'd be in and out just like every other physical that he had had. This exam was different because the doctor decided to run extra tests while he was there. When the doctor told Richard he had cystic fibrosis, he couldn't believe it. He felt fine physically and didn't expect to find out he had a serious health condition, and he didn't take the news well. Genetic condition. Richard's sister was diagnosed with a condition, and he knew he could have it too, but he couldn't believe it took 55 years for a correct diagnosis. Cystic fibrosis causes frequent lung infections, leading to damaged lungs and decreased lung capacity, making breathing hard. Because cystic fibrosis is a genetic condition, he worried that he may have passed the disease on to his sons. Questions. Richard was worried he passed the gene to his sons and knew he had to ask the doctor, even though he was afraid to hear the doctor's response. He was worried his kids would have to face the same diagnosis, so he asked the doctor what to expect and never expected what would come next. Infertility. The doctor thought that Richard was talking about having children with his second wife, Emma, and told him that they wouldn't be able to have children of their own because men with cystic fibrosis are infertile. Richard couldn't believe what he was hearing because he already had 3 healthy grown sons. Misdiagnosis? When Richard heard this, he was sure the doctor had misdiagnosed his condition and that further testing would be necessary. Richard was happy at this point because he was confident his sons confirmed the diagnosis was wrong. At the time, he never suspected that the doctor got the diagnosis right and his ex-wife had been lying to him all along. Kate lied. It didn't take long for Richard to realize that the diagnosis was correct and Kate had been lying to him for years. Not only did he have to deal with a serious health condition, but he also had to expect that his 3 sons weren't his biological children. Richard felt like his world was crashing down, but he had to learn the truth about Kate's lies. Putting the pieces together. Richard sat in the doctor's office and started thinking and trying to put the pieces together. He started thinking about all the times Kate could have been sneaking off with another man. He thought back to times when he should have seen a red flag, but he always pushed these thoughts out of his mind because he trusted her, couldn't believe she had lied. The red flags. The more Richard thought about it, the more he realized there were plenty of chances for Kate to be unfaithful. The distraught father of 3 worked hard and had a successful career, which required him to work late into the night. Richard didn't think much about it when Kate had work-related matters that kept her late at work. He remembered when Kate stayed in London overnight during what she said was a work trip and claimed her flight was canceled. The pieces were finally fitting together, and Richard's life was imploding. Richard's kids don't look like him. Before his diagnosis, Richard never considered that he wasn't the father of his 3 boys. When he found out about infertility, he started thinking. Richard remembered people saying the boys looked like Kate when they were born and not like Richard, but he blew it off. Most kids resemble one of their parents and assume that Kate's DNA is more potent than his. Another red flag. When Kate found out she was pregnant with Will, the couple had been married for 7 years. During this time, she never told Richard that she'd like to raise their future children in the Jewish faith. Richard and Kate were both Christians and had been baptized. So Richard was shocked when Kate told him that she met with a rabbi and planned to teach the kids Judaism, and even gave the 3 boys Jewish middle names. Looking back, Richard wished he had paid more attention and asked more questions. Who could be the dad? Richard's head was spinning while he tried to put the pieces to this devastating puzzle together. He started thinking about who the boys looked like other than Kate, and he thought they looked similar to someone he knew. He just couldn't figure out who it was. Richard was sure the boys weren't his biological children since he was infertile and knew he had to get to the bottom of it. The prime suspect. Richard tried to think logically and realized if his ex cheated while they were married, it likely happened during one of her business trips. He thought about all the men Kate worked with, and there was one man who resembled his 3 boys. The final piece of the puzzle came together when he realized the man he suspected was Jewish. The email. Richard wanted to confront Kate, but they were divorced and didn't live together, so he sent her an email. It read, "Hi, I went to Liverpool Chest Hospital today to receive finally my diagnosis that I have cystic fibrosis. In their experience, they've never had a man with CF who has fathered a child, let alone 3. They went on to say that it's 98% certain that I'm not the father of any of the children. I was hoping you could relieve me of the further indignity of more tests by letting me know now if I'm the father. I'm happy to go along with your advice as to how to best tell the boys." Kate read the email but didn't reply. No response. When Kate didn't respond to Richard's email, he decided to send another one. He had to know the truth about his sons and believe Kate owed him. He sent a second email that read, "I was hoping that you could relieve me of further indignity by telling me now if I'm the father. I'm happy to go along with your advice as to how to best tell the boys, but if you force me to go through these extra tests, then I shall be telling them as I wish." Kate's response. Kate replied to Richard's second email and denied that she had an affair during their marriage, and there was no way anyone but Richard was the biological father of the 3 boys. She wrote, "Of course the boys are yours, no matter what the science might suggest." When Richard read his ex-wife's reply, he decided to go ahead with the additional tests. Reaching out to Will. Richard knew he had to tell his sons about his diagnosis and wanted a DNA test to determine if he was his son's biological father. He reached out to Will, who was 23 years old at the time. Richard planned to have both conversations with his son on the same day. When Richard told his son he had cystic fibrosis, Will seemed surprisingly calm. Richard explained to Will that it was highly unlikely that a man with CF could father a child. Will understood what his father was saying and asked if Richard believed he probably wasn't his biological father. Richard told his son everything. Richard believed his conversation with his son would have been difficult, but Will already knew what his father was trying to say. He reassured his son that even if they weren't genetically related, he would always be the boy's father. He couldn't believe he had to have this conversation with his 23-year-old son, which made him even angrier at Kate for lying to him all these years. Too much to handle. Richard couldn't believe the turn his life had taken, and it was too much to handle. He always thought that his 3 sons would have grandchildren and keep his bloodline alive. Now this wasn't possible. On top of that, Richard had to wrap his head around the fact that he wouldn't have as much time on Earth as he thought, and having to speak to his son about both issues was a lot for the father of 3 to handle. Will confronted Kate. After speaking with his father, Will decided to confront his mother. Although Kate lied to Richard, she told Will the truth. She admitted to having an affair which started while she and Richard were married. Kate told Will that it was likely that his biological father wasn't the person he believed it was, and Richard's suspicions about his ex were correct. The affair. Kate finally admitted to having an affair which started after she married Richard and met the man when she and Richard worked together at the bank. Richard was right about everything, and the man Kate had an affair with worked at Barclays Bank. He didn't know that the affair went on for 20 years, and his ex had kept it a secret from everyone. Insisting Richard is the father. Although Kate did admit her affair to Will, she insisted that Richard was the boy's biological father. Will didn't believe his mother and decided to take the DNA test. By this point, Richard felt that his whole life had been a lie, and his ex had been living a double life, letting him believe the boys he raised were his. When the tests were complete, Richard's suspicions would be confirmed. The tests. Richard took several tests suggested by Roger Terrell, a paternity fraud expert. The first would test Richard's fertility levels, and it was confirmed that Richard would never be able to father a child. Next, Richard needed to submit a DNA test and would need samples from his sons to see if they matched. His sons Ed and Joel took the test, and Richard learned he wasn't their father. Will said that his father would always be his father, so the test was unnecessary. A family divided. Richard decided to sue Kate, but Will disagreed. He told Richard that if he were to sue his mother, he'd never talk to his father again. The twins supported their father and told Richard he would always be their dad no matter what. The court ordered Kate to pay $300,000, and part of the agreement was that the boy's biological father would never be revealed. The boys had a right to know their biological father, but agreed to the terms. Richard is currently receiving treatment for his CF and has reported that his health is improving.